The history of humankind has always been wrapped in a strange veil. Among all living creatures on Earth, humans stand apart, capable of creating wonders, yet equally capable of contradictions that border on madness. Buried beneath layers of soil and time, traces remain. From ancient fossils to objects so enigmatic that even the most hardened archaeologists are left stunned. Some discoveries are ordinary, but others are so macabre, so bizarre, that they remind us of the thin line between genius and madness. One such discovery emerged in Italy, within a site tied to the Lombards, a Germanic people known for their constant involvement in war. Excavations revealed a collective grave of more than 200 individuals, dating back over 1,000 years. But the most unsettling detail was not the sheer number of bodies. It was one man, registered by archaeologists as individual number 380, who died sometime between 40 and 50 years of age. This man carried a scar that set him apart from the rest. His right forearm had been amputated, a traumatic injury in an era when medicine had no anesthetics, no antibiotics, and no real means of pain relief. To survive such an ordeal was already extraordinary. But what left scientists speechless was what replaced the missing limb: a blade of iron, fixed to his stump as a permanent prosthetic. This was no decoration. The man had used it for years. The evidence lay in his bones. His shoulder had adapted, reshaped under the pressure of constant mechanical strain. His teeth were worn down to the pulp, scarred from tightening the leather straps that secured the blade to his arm. Infections and abscesses marked his jaw, yet he endured, living long enough to make this prosthesis part of his daily life. Even the bone of the stump bore the marks of repeated friction, showing that this blade was no passive replacement. It was an active tool, an extension of his body. The image is almost cinematic: a warrior who once lost his arm in battle, returning to fight with an iron blade strapped to his stump. A man who endured unimaginable pain, yet refused to surrender. He lived into his 50s, a remarkable age for his time. For all the suffering his body carried, his death was likely natural. But his story is more than that. It is a silent testimony of human resilience, and perhaps of human madness. Yet his story, gripping as it is, pales when we turn our eyes to something far older. In the dry lands of Kenya's Turkana region, a single bone tells an even darker tale. It was a tibia, about 1,450,000 years old. Not the bone of a modern human, but of an ancient cousin, one of the species that walked beside us on evolution's path. The tibia was deeply scarred. 9 long incisions cut across the bone with precision, marks made not by accident, but by tools. These were cuts made by other hominids, targeting the flesh, the muscles, and the tendons. In other words, this bone carried the earliest direct evidence of butchery, an act of defleshing another being of the human family. It was cannibalism. And it was no isolated act. The environment was brutal. Water sources shifted, the climate brought punishing droughts, and food grew scarce. Survival was uncertain. In such a world, one species of hominid may have turned against another, not as an act of cruelty, but of necessity. Still, the thought is chilling. The victim's name, their species, and their killer remain unknown. All we have is a bone carved with silent violence, an ancient memory of hunger and desperation. Even more unsettling is the possibility that it was not even a matter of different species. It may have been one individual butchered by their own kind, a reminder that cannibalism is as old as humanity itself. But if the Turkana tibia represents the oldest clear trace of cannibalism, another site in Africa raises even stranger questions about the human mind. Rising Star Cave in South Africa holds one of the most extraordinary discoveries in anthropology. Known since the 1980s, the cave is a labyrinth, treacherous and deep, with narrow passages that force even the slimmest explorers to crawl like Superman, arms stretched forward. At the end of one path lies a hidden chamber, the Dinalidi Chamber, and inside, the remains of not one, but 15 individuals of all ages: infants, children, adults, and elders. What was bizarre was not only the sheer number of fossils, over 100 fragments, but the fact that they belonged to a completely unknown species, Homo naledi. Smaller, lighter than modern humans, with tiny brains yet surprisingly dexterous hands, they lived between 335,000 to 230,000 years ago. But what truly disturbed researchers was how the bodies reached this chamber. There were no signs of flooding, no predator's den, no accidental falls. The path was too difficult for bodies to simply tumble in. The remains had been placed there, deliberately. Did Homo naledi perform one of the earliest known rituals of death? Did they carry their dead into the darkness of the cave, passing through impossible passages, only to leave them in the chamber? If so, it means these small-brained beings engaged in behavior once thought unique to Homo sapiens, caring for the dead, and perhaps fearing them. The implications are staggering. Fire may have been used to light the way, though no direct evidence has been confirmed. Some suggest the naledi made marks to guide themselves. Others dismiss the idea entirely, arguing that modern humans may have intruded later. Yet the fact remains, the bones show no evidence of predators, no signs of water, and no trauma. They were placed there, carefully, intentionally. And here we must pause. If you are captivated by these haunting stories of human resilience and human darkness, then subscribe if you like the video, because what follows dives even deeper into the unsettling corners of our shared past. From Italy to Kenya, from South Africa to the edges of human imagination, every discovery points to the same truth. Humanity has always walked hand in hand with brilliance and brutality. The Lombard warrior forged strength from pain. The ancient hominid of Turkana was carved apart in hunger, and the naledi may have dragged their dead into the depths of stone, leaving us a puzzle of intention that challenges our very definition of what it means to be human. But this is only the beginning. The evidence of madness in our species does not stop at prosthetic blades, butchered bones, or mysterious burials. In the most remote mountains of India, at the edge of an icy lake, hundreds of skeletons still lie scattered, whispering another tale of fear, tragedy, and human fragility. High in the Himalayas of India lies a lake that is as beautiful as it is terrifying. Surrounded by snow and rock, Rupkund Lake is small and shallow, just a hollow filled with icy water. But what gives it its nickname, the Lake of Skeletons, is the shocking sight that greets anyone who approaches. Scattered around the shoreline, preserved by altitude and freezing temperatures, lie the bones of hundreds of people. Not neatly buried, not carefully arranged, simply spread across the ground, as if death struck suddenly and without warning. When British officials stumbled upon the site in the 1940s, they were horrified. At first, they suspected an invasion. Could these be Japanese soldiers killed in secret during the Second World War? But the artifacts told a different story. Wooden tools, iron spearheads, sandals of leather, and rings suggested something far older. Radiocarbon dating later revealed that many of these skeletons were nearly 1,000 years old. The real mystery, however, was how they all died. Many skulls showed the same type of wound, deep fractures caused by large, round objects. Not swords, not arrows, something heavier. Investigators proposed a grim answer: hail. A hailstorm so violent that it crushed dozens of travelers at once, killing them instantly on the mountainside. Local folklore seemed to echo this theory. Villagers told stories of an ancient king, his family, and entourage struck down by stones from the sky. The legend may not have been metaphorical after all. It may have been memory preserved in song. But the more scientists studied the lake, the stranger it became. Not all the skeletons matched. Some were South Asian, yes, but others carried genetic signatures from far away, from Greece and Crete. Even more puzzling, these groups had not died at the same time. Two groups perished roughly 1,000 years ago, but a third group had died only 200 years ago. That meant Rupkund had claimed lives repeatedly, across centuries. The mystery only deepened. Was it always hail? Was it some hidden danger in the lake itself? Or was Rupkund a cursed place where travelers met their end again and again? The answers remain uncertain, but one truth is clear. This remote pool in the Himalayas has drawn humans toward death for centuries. As unsettling as a field of skeletons is, there are discoveries far more intimate, objects meant to resemble life, yet built from death itself. In the Levant, around the ancient city of Jericho, archaeologists unearthed strange human-like heads. At first glance, they looked like sculptures, made of plaster, painted, and decorated with shells for eyes. But inside, hidden beneath the plaster, were real human skulls. More than 20 of these skulls have been found, dating back between 10,000 and 8,000 years. Most belong to adult men, though some belong to women and children. Their lower jaws were removed, and their faces were carefully reconstructed in plaster, as if to bring the dead back into the living world. These plastered skulls were buried under the floors of houses, beneath the places where families ate, slept, and lived. They were not forgotten. Instead, they were dug up and reburied over and over, manipulated by generations who may not have remembered the individuals, but who honored them as ancestors. The effect is deeply unsettling. Imagine sitting in your home, knowing that beneath your floor, staring upward with painted eyes, were the preserved faces of your ancestors. Some researchers suggest this was a form of ancestor worship, a way of keeping the dead close to the living. Others propose darker interpretations. Trophies, perhaps, taken in conflict. Whatever the intent, the result is the same. An eerie blending of life and death, memory and flesh, honor and horror. But Jericho is not alone in its macabre creativity. On the Scottish island of South Uist, archaeologists made a discovery that pushed the limits of imagination. In the remains of Bronze Age houses, they found skeletons lying on the floor, seemingly ordinary at first. Yet when examined closely, the truth emerged. These were not complete individuals. They were puzzles. One body, for example, seemed to belong to a woman, but the skull and several bones belonged to men. In fact, the skeleton was composed of 3 different people. The others were the same, bodies assembled from parts of the dead, pieced together like grotesque patchwork. And there was more. These remains showed chemical traces of having been soaked in acidic environments, like peat bogs. It was as if the bodies had been submerged in the bog for years, preserved and softened, before being reassembled and placed in the home. Radiocarbon dating revealed that the bones were hundreds of years older than the houses in which they were found. Why? That is the question that haunts researchers. Were these composite ancestors created to embody the lineage of an entire community? Were they honored relics, carried through time and reassembled as guardians of the living? Or were they something darker? Trophies, displays of dominance, signs of violence hidden behind ritual? Whatever the reason, the image is haunting. Families living their daily lives in houses that contain skeletons made from the flesh and bones of multiple people, preserved for generations, treated as if they were sacred objects. The line between reverence and madness blurs. Humans have always tried to preserve their dead, to find meaning in death, to anchor themselves to their past. But sometimes, the methods are so extreme, so unsettling, that they look less like devotion and more like obsession. And yet, these eerie practices are not the darkest chapters in our story. For that, we must travel to the deserts of North America, where ancient communities once lived in pit houses, dwellings dug into the earth. Here, the evidence of violence and hunger reveals a descent into something truly horrifying: organized, systematic cannibalism. In southwestern Colorado, archaeologists uncovered a site belonging to the basket maker Pueblo culture. At first, it seemed like any other ruin. But inside the pit houses, they found bodies, at least 24 of them. And 7 of those bodies bore the unmistakable marks of something far worse than death. Their flesh had been stripped from their bones. Their skulls were smashed, charred, and split open, their brains removed. Their bones bore cut marks and signs of roasting. Pots still held traces of cooked human flesh. And in the ashes of the hearth, researchers found something that removed all doubt: human excrement containing muscle protein, proving that one of the attackers had eaten human meat and left behind the evidence. This was not symbolic. This was not ritual. It was a feast. The scale of the violence suggested something larger than an isolated act. Across the region, archaeologists identified more than 70 sites with evidence of cannibalism, 38 of them confirmed beyond doubt. Out of 870 skeletons studied, more than 8% bore signs of being butchered and eaten. The basket maker Pueblo had shifted from a relatively peaceful society to one gripped by violence, starvation, and cannibalism. Why? The reasons may lie in the collapse of the Chaco system, a powerful cultural and political center that disintegrated around 850 years ago. Combined with devastating droughts, communities fractured, famine spread, and people turned to the unthinkable. What is most chilling is not the act itself, but the reminder it gives us. When survival is at stake, humanity is capable of turning its neighbors, even its kin, into food. The evidence from Colorado shows us that even advanced communities can collapse into horror when famine and chaos strike. But this was not the only time humans descended into madness. The deeper we dig into our past, the more unsettling the picture becomes. Violence, ritual, and desperation are woven into the very fabric of our history. Take, for example, the Neolithic period in Europe. Archaeologists have found mass graves scattered across the continent. Pits filled with men, women, and children, many showing signs of brutal death. At Talheim in Germany, a single trench contained the remains of more than 30 people, most with crushed skulls and broken legs. These were not casualties of battle. They were families, wiped out in sudden massacres. The killers struck without mercy, then dumped the bodies into the earth like discarded refuse. Why would entire communities annihilate one another? Competition for resources may explain it. Fields and livestock were precious, and rival groups may have sought to eliminate not just enemies, but entire bloodlines. It is chilling to realize that such brutality was not an exception. It was part of everyday survival. And yet, even in the midst of death, humans found ways to transform violence into ritual. In many Neolithic graves, skulls were removed and displayed, perhaps as trophies, perhaps as symbols of power. Some were arranged in circles. Others were painted or carved. The human head was not just a body part. It was a vessel of meaning, a token of dominance, or a relic of ancestry. Fast forward thousands of years, and the obsession with human remains continues. Consider the bog bodies of Northern Europe. Perfectly preserved in peat bogs, some of these corpses date back over 2,000 years. Their skin, hair, and even stomach contents remain intact. But their condition tells a darker story. Many were killed violently, throats slit, skulls smashed, strangled with cords. And yet, they were carefully placed in the bog, as though sacrificed to the land itself. These people were not criminals thrown away. They were chosen, offered in rituals that combined devotion, fear, and cruelty. The bog preserved them as silent witnesses, their faces frozen in death, staring across the centuries at those who would one day unearth them. Then there are the caves, those dark spaces that humans have always filled with secrets. In France and Spain, painted caves like Lascaux and Altamira show us animals, symbols, and mysteries from over 15,000 years ago. But other caves hide grimmer relics. In some, piles of bones reveal that people once placed their dead deep underground. In others, cut marks suggest cannibalism, just as in Kenya or Colorado. Darkness became a stage for both art and atrocity. The most unsettling thing is how normal these practices seem when viewed in context. For those who lived them, there was no madness, no insanity, only necessity, belief, or tradition. What we see as horrific, they may have seen as sacred. What we call madness, they might have called survival. But perhaps the most macabre evidence of all is the persistence of these behaviors. From the plastered skulls of Jericho to the composite skeletons of Scotland, from the massacre pits of Europe to the cannibal hearths of Colorado, we see the same pattern repeated across time and geography. Humans create beauty, but they also embrace horror. They honor the dead, but they also consume them. They build communities, but they also destroy them. This is the duality of our species, capable of compassion and cruelty, reverence and savagery. And the bones we find remind us of this truth again and again. Even today, we cannot escape it. Modern wars, genocides, and atrocities echo the same madness we see in ancient remains. Technology may change, but the human heart remains vulnerable to fear, hunger, and hatred. The line between civilization and chaos is thinner than we like to believe. So when archaeologists unearth a skeleton with its skull crushed, or a bone scarred by knife marks, they are not just studying the past. They are holding up a mirror to our present and our future. They are reminding us that beneath the surface of progress lies the same capacity for violence and obsession that shaped our ancestors. And yet, there is also resilience. The Lombard warrior with his iron prosthetic, living decades beyond an amputation that should have killed him, shows us the other side of humanity: endurance, adaptation, and creativity. The Homo naledi, placing their dead in the deepest chamber of a cave, show us a sense of ritual, perhaps even compassion. Even the plastered skulls, disturbing as they are, reflect a longing to keep loved ones close, to honor those who came before. Madness and meaning, horror and hope. That is the true story of our species. So the next time you hear of a new discovery, a skeleton in a bog, bones in a cave, or a field of skulls, remember that it is not just archaeology. It is us. It is humanity laid bare, in all its contradictions. And perhaps that is why these stories captivate us. They are frightening, yes, but they also remind us of what it means to be human, to survive, to struggle, to seek meaning, even in death. If you have reached this far, you already know that the past is not a distant world. It is a reflection of ourselves. And as unsettling as it may be, it is also a reminder of the strength, the madness, and the mystery that define us.